Ayatollah Khamenei is dead.
اضرب 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 اضرب.
Hi and welcome. My name is Robert Walker. I'm with Canada Charitable Organization. Welcome to our emergency briefing on the Iran war. Obviously, things are changing rapidly now. We're here only about 48 or so hours, perhaps 60 hours since the war began. We're here with Amit Segal from Channel 12 News in Israel, a political correspondent. Many of you are, of course, aware of him from many podcasts and interviews in the last few months. Adam Zivo. Adam is a Canadian reporter and journalist. He's also a contributing columnist to the National Post. Adam is also actually in Israel at this time. And so Adam will be conducting the interview with Amit. So without further ado, Adam and Amit, please take it away.
Yeah. I mean, on the whole, Amit, how would you describe the mood in Israel today? And how does this war compare to the previous ones, the 12-day war last June?
There is a phrase in British English called "stiff upper lip." It was, I think, it was invented to actually describe the response of Brits to the Blitz in the 40s, and I think it actually depicts quite well the Israeli reaction for two reasons. One is because we are quite familiar with the situation. So it's quite similar to the Rising Lion operation, but even less dramatic because, I mean, it's not the first time. And the second thing, and this is a general rule in Israel following October 7th, he who experienced the loss of 1,200 Israelis in 6 hours, the huge massacre, can stand almost everything. It gives proportions. So that's my my assessment.
And then, of course, although many Israelis were used to the smaller rockets of Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis, the Iranian ballistic missiles from last summer were something different. You couldn't just go to the hallway to feel relatively safe. You had to go to the shelter. And so that might have been scary for many people the first time around. But from the Israelis who I've interviewed over the past 2 days, they say, you know what? We know what to expect. We went through this before. We just need to follow protocol. There are shelters everywhere. The system is quite organized. And as long as we do what we're told, we should be fine.
Absolutely. So here's the thing. First of all, yes. Second, I mean, Israelis have gone through many different. It was like having a tutorial about the various rockets and missiles by the Iranian axis. We've gone through the Hamas Scads, the Hezbollah Katyushas, the Grads, and now all the way to the ballistic missiles. Ballistic missiles from Iran are the worst part, or the worst weapon in the arsenal. And yet, once you're in shelter, it gives you not 100% protection, but I would say 99.9%. We saw yesterday the disaster in Bechemish, where 9 people were killed in a shelter, but it's a very, very rare situation. And that's why, yes, you're quite safe.
Well, when I speak to Israelis, they all acknowledge, hey, if a ballistic missile hits the shelter that we're in right now, we're all going to die. But the chance of that, statistically speaking, is akin to being hit by a car. And so they accept that risk as being a necessary price for the war against Iran and the possibility of living in a more peaceful Middle East where the mullahs are no longer holding their citizens hostage.
Exactly. And you see the difference, by the way. You see images from Iran where citizens are quite safe. By the way, not only protesters, but people who are supporters of the regime going to the streets to actually mourn the death of the big dictator. And they are not under any danger whatsoever, whereas in Israel it's totally different.
Yeah, it's interesting how civilian populations in both countries are protected by Israel's conscientiousness. Israelis are protected by air sirens and shelters, and Iranians are protected by the precise strikes that Israel launches. Now, one thing I wonder, I'd love to get your thoughts here. So, the first day of the war, I found was a little bit spicy. I think we had 12, 13, 14 alarms over the course of the first day. No one slept, of course. But then yesterday was fairly quiet. Today has been fairly quiet. Uh, I've been somewhat pleasantly surprised about the fact that I can work on my articles without having to go in and out of the shelters all day. Now, I was speaking with another analyst today, and they speculated that this is because Iran has dispersed its attentions across the entire region. They're attacking all of these Arab Gulf states. They're bombing Qatar, they're bombing Saudi Arabia, they're bombing the UAE. And so Israel isn't getting as much flack. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that this could possibly explain why life in Tel Aviv is maybe not as disrupted as one would have assumed?
So this is definitely one of the explanations. Sorry, just to give you statistics: 63% of the ballistic missiles and drones fired from Iran fell in the UAE. So whereas in the Rising Lion operation, it was 100% Israel, now it's something like 25%. This is one thing. And second, because the US Air Force is operating in Iran, it paves the way for the Israeli Air Force to actually operate almost exclusively against the ballistic missile launchers, which gives more and more pressure on this array of launchers. So I think we are going to see, I hope, we're going to see a decline even more in the number, a slippery slope in the curve of ballistic missiles fired from Iran.
Some critics of this war have said that it is unacceptable that the United States and Israel is attacking Iran because it's against international law. I personally think that this is nonsense because international law is deeply flawed. What is your take on this?
My take is that it's quite interesting to get criticism about international law, uh, about a war that is targeted against the biggest violator of international law worldwide in the last generation. Iran initiated the October 7th attack in Israel, which was a break of the international law. It sent its ballistic missiles from Yemen to actually fire to destroy the oil industry in Saudi Arabia, etc., etc., etc. And that's why I wouldn't take too seriously the criticism about this from these people.
Yeah, they seem very selective in how they invoke international law and also how they invoke the well-being of the Iranians. They will say, oh, you know, think about all the Iranian civilians who are going to die in this war, even though that number is relatively small. And yet they were so quiet when tens of thousands of innocent Iranians were slaughtered in just across a few days earlier this year.
Absolutely. That's the main thing. Plus, I think it's like a dog whistle to see hypocrisy in action. I mean, if you see people who haven't protested against the massacre of 32,000 peaceful protesters in Iran, but now actually issue condemnations for the Israeli and the American attack against the Iranian regime, so it might give you a hint about whether they are really interested in, human rights and international law, or they are interested in preserving the control of the Shiite terrorist fundamentalist regime.
So, for those who are watching, notice the background has changed. It's Israel. Things can be a bit chaotic when recording interviews outside. Now, to build on the earlier point, we talked about how international law is selectively invoked, and that, of course, betrays people's actual motivations when they care so much about international law when it comes to attacking Iran, but don't care when Iran is massacring civilians. But it would also seem as if we needed to update our general understanding and discourse of international law because it doesn't account for the use of proxy forces, right? We know that international law allows for self-defense, but that allowance only extends to proxy forces but not to their puppeteers. And Iran seems to be taking advantage of that and saying, look, we can attack you using Hamas, Hezbollah, and Houthis, but if you respond, that's illegal.
Exactly. And I would like to explain something about the proxy because I think now we see the mirror picture of it. For many, many years, Iran operated against the entire Middle East by sending designated specific proxies, the Yemen, the Houthis, to actually disturb and annoy Saudis, Hamas to take care of Israel, Hezbollah the same. All of a sudden, the United States of America started using Israel as its proxy. The Rising Lion operation was Israel serving as a proxy for the United States, and that's when President Trump used the same term when he talked to Iran. He said, "Listen, it's not us, but now if you want, let's negotiate, let's open the table." And I think this is what's so interesting about it. So they are exposed, and you see now that when they reached the moment of truth, when push comes to shove, none of the proxies really helped them. Hezbollah got $30 billion of investments from Iran over the last 30 years. Yet last night, when he got a demand from Iran to fire at Israel, he attacked Israel with, it was a token attack. 3 rockets for $30 billion. This is the utter failure of the proxy policy, the proxy strategy of the Iranian regime.
Now, I think an important part of all of this is Iran's political and military isolation. We know, for example, that Tehran reached out to Moscow to request assistance, and Moscow shrugged and said, we can't do much about it. So I wonder, does it seem as if this axis of resistance, this block of authoritarians, might be flimsier than it seemed a year or two ago? That there is less solidarity amongst our opponents that we once believed?
Okay, so first of all, think about it as not as McDonald's, but as other restaurants. I'll explain. Usually, how it works is that. So if the example is not as accurate, but bear with me. McDonald's can open different branches in different countries, right? So if McDonald's collapses, so the McDonald's branch in Tel Aviv, just 5 minutes from you, will shut down as well. Where I think when it comes to the proxies, it's not exactly the case. Hezbollah is a McDonald's branch in Lebanon, of course, but Hamas isn't. Hamas was established before it got the first dime from Iran. This was way after Hamas was established in 1997. Same applies for the Houthis. So if Iran collapses, Hezbollah would collapse, definitely. Hamas would be weakened and the Houthis would be damaged. But it's different various systems. By the way, the best example that resembles how fragile this axis of evil was is actually October 7th. Because on October 7th, Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, invaded Israel without pre-notifying his sugar daddies in Tehran, which by the way helped Israel to take them one enemy at a time.
So we know that the axis of evil is more fragile than we thought, but what are the prospects here for a collapse in the Iranian regime? Does that seem like a likely outcome based on what you know? Obviously, none of us have insights into the dynamics within Iran, so much of this is speculation. But based on what you know, does this seem like a realistic possibility? Some people argue that there is the possibility that the IRGC could simply install a new supreme leader and tighten its control, and that would be a negative outcome. So how do we weigh between these different potential outcomes?
I would say that there are more than 50% chance that by the end of Trump's term in the White House, there will be a different leadership in Tehran. However, we still don't know when it's going to happen, who's going to replace the current leadership, and what the outcomes would be. I would depict 2 options. One is the best option in the eyes of Israelis and Americans alike, which is a new horizon, a new leadership, secular, pro-Israeli, pro-Western, like it was prior to 1979. However, there is an option that is going to be Pakistan, or a better example, more updated, Venezuela. In Venezuela, the vice president of Maduro is now actually running Caracas. Does it make Venezuela a liberal Western democracy? No. Does it make it more cooperative towards the United States? Does it channel the investments, the oil, the money towards the United States rather than China? Yes. I think this is the what might come up. Let's say a more moderate figure from from within the Iranian establishment that will come to a conclusion that fighting Iran and Israel, fighting the US and Israel wasn't the best idea.
Now, when we talk about what the future might look like, we can't avoid discussing exiled Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. He is incredibly popular amongst the Iranian diaspora. We've had hundreds of thousands of Iranians come onto the streets of Canada, in Toronto, in Vancouver, and a few other cities, calling for Pahlavi to lead a transitional government. But what do Israelis think about Pahlavi as a figure? You know, do they also seem as optimistic about his potential leadership?
Okay, so yes, he actually visited Israel, what his father didn't bother to do while in office. So he is a very popular figure within inside Israel. The question is he going to be the ruler of Iran like his father was, or to be more like, like a symbolic figure, like the queen in the United Kingdom, the king, or the president of the state of Israel? I think that this is an option. Option two is more preferable and feasible alike.
I do know that there are some Iranians who are deeply concerned about the Pahlavi movement because they are, as you mentioned, they don't want another dictator. Although I wonder, if Pahlavi did want to consolidate power and become a dictator, whether that would even be possible for him, because he was not taken seriously until recently. His support was just a small number of diehard monarchists, and then he did a lot of work over the past few years to gain legitimacy by working with Iranian diasporic groups, with civil society actors to put together a credible transition plan. But if his base of support, if this coalition is new and broad, then that suggests that it's also perhaps a little fragile. And so if he betrays the promises he made, could he just simply be ousted in a way that his father could not be so easily taken care of?
Absolutely. And, opposition in Iran is, there are 50 shades of opposition in Iran. Like the war there had been, prior to the Islamic Revolution in 1979. So we don't really know who's going to take over Iran. But if Reza Pahlavi is smart enough, he would try to do exactly this, to actually be the symbolic figure rather than, having to stick to 100 different campaign pledges.
Now, one thing I do want to bring up in our conversation for viewers who might not be familiar with this dynamic, but one thing that struck me over the past few months as I began to better understand this conflict is the deep sense of fraternity between the Iranian people and the Israeli people. And that's something that I saw right away when I went to the Free Iran protests in Toronto. I joked with my friends that the safest place to publicly hold an Israeli flag in Canada was amongst the Iranian community. We saw so many Israeli flags held by Iranians, by Israelis. And when I came here, I saw that this love was reciprocated. When I was in Israel during the 12-day war, despite the fact that the Islamic regime's ballistic missiles were exploding in the sky, not a single Israeli said anything negative about the Iranian people. They praised the Iranian people incessantly. And I have only seen that dynamic continue over the past 2 days, with everyone saying the Iranians are so smart, they're sophisticated, we can't wait to be friends with them, we can't wait for them to come here, we can't wait to go there. So for yourself, can you give us some more of that historical context for viewers who might not be aware of why this bromance exists?
Okay, so I think it's Purim is a perfect timing to speak about it, right? Because we saw the Cyrus Declaration that gave Jews, a license to rebuild their temple in Jerusalem. And only a few years later, we saw Haman trying to actually make the first genocide against the Jewish people. The same applies for Iran, modern Iran. Prior to 1979, I don't know how many people are aware of it. There were 2 daily flights from Tel Aviv to Tehran. This was the number one touristic destination for Israelis because it was close, cheap, and friendly. Israeli constructors built some 70% of the public institutions in Tehran. There were even an effort to have a mutual nuclear project to Iran and Israel. And then because Iran is a very fluctuation, actually, is quite a regular phenomenon in Iran. So they moved from one edge of being very pro-Israeli to the other. That's why the hope now is that it's gonna move exactly the other way around.
Yeah. And then I also think an underappreciated element to this conversation is how Israel has a fairly significant Persian minority. About 2 to 3% of Israelis are Persians, Persian Jews who fled after the Islamic Revolution or who came to Israel after the state was established. The Israelis who I speak with, I always ask them about this, and they say, yeah, Persian culture is not anything unknown in Israel. It is deeply suffused throughout the country. Everyone knows saffron rice and other Persian delicacies. And so there's no reason for them to resent Persians or Persian culture because Persian culture is a part of the mosaic of Israeli life.
Exactly. So this is one of the reasons too.
Now, I'm wondering, what do you think is some of the key misunderstandings of this conflict for those who are in the West? When they're looking in as outsiders, what are some things that they often don't get?
How resilient it is. I mean, you are now in the streets of Tel Aviv. I'm in Jerusalem. I can say those are regular days, but you see robust citizen behavior. And I think this is the number one thing. You see tourism, coffee shops, people going to work. You see, I'll give you one example. The stock market went up 4%, more than 4% today, the first day after the war has begun, which is the best day in Tel Aviv stock market since COVID crisis in 2020. I think it signals something.
What's interesting here is how we talk about this, right? So, I struggle with this as an outsider sometimes, as someone who is neither Israeli nor Jewish, because on one hand, it's important to call attention to the resilience of Israeli society, to talk about how people are still living their lives and going to cafes. But then there's always the risk that in spotlighting that, we might accidentally trivialize the war or trivialize the casualties that have occurred or trivialize the suffering of people who have lost their homes. And it's a difficult wire to cross sometimes, a tightrope.
Absolutely. Very interesting. And there is it's a cautious pessimism combined with the tragedy of living in such an area. It's something that, I can't even explain it. It's like, those unique words in Danish that you can't explain something, but they know it without translation. So I would say that the word in Hebrew is davka. There is no translation. That's saying, we're standing in spite everything, but it's stronger than this. So you should study Hebrew as soon as possible.
Yeah, I'm already learning Ukrainian. Hebrew is a bit too much. Now, we talked about the relationship between Persians and Israelis. But what I think is interesting here is how this war might also affect the relationship between Israelis and Arabs. Because we know that since the late 2010s and early 2020s, many Arab states have been building their relationship with Israel, partially because they're scared of Iran. So we had the Abraham Accords, we had Saudi Arabia on the cusp of normalizing its relationship with Israel. And then, of course, Iran derailed that by orchestrating October 7th. And one of the underlying problems with this movement is that it was mostly pushed by the elites of these states because they feared radical Islamism, they feared how that could destabilize their countries and perhaps collapse their monarchies. And so because there was a gap between elite opinion and the opinion of everyday constituents, not voters, because these are not democracies, that seemed to constrain what these Gulf states could do, because you can only deviate from public opinion so much when it comes to working with Israel. But now that Iranian drones are exploding in Bahrain, in Doha, in Dubai, I wonder if we will see Arab citizens rethinking their relationship with Israel when they see Israelis working hard to help keep their skies safe too. And maybe we could see a world in 5 to 10 years where this hatred is diminished and there is a new vision for peaceful coexistence.
Yes, and here's the absurd. I mean, the Middle East is still a very quite hostile neighborhood for Israelis and Jews. However, if we're an alien telling one of them, take me to your leader, maybe in 2 weeks, we are not going to know who the leader is. I mean, if Iran collapses, how do you actually come to terms with two contradicting facts? One, that there are hundreds of millions of Arabs and Muslims who want your country to actually to be destroyed. And on the other hand, that there isn't any leadership for it. So maybe it's going to be Turkey, maybe it's going to be Turkey and Qatar, and maybe, and this is, I guess, that's what you're hinting is that we are going to see 20 years relatively peaceful with more normalization processes around the Middle East, maybe Saudi Arabia, maybe Lebanon, even Syria. Who knows? I stick to optimism, but to be honest, it's too early to call.
And throughout this conversation, one thing that we haven't touched upon yet is the Palestinians. And of course, it's very difficult to talk about Israel without talking about Palestine too. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, the Palestinian Authority condemned some Iranian attacks.
The the Pakistani one?
No, the Palestinian Authority.
The Palestinians. Sorry, I didn't know. Okay. To be honest, I don't know. It took President Abbas a lot of time to have condemned the October 7th, so I won't be surprised. But I'm quite sure they are not very happy with what's going on for two reasons. One, because the half of the Palestinians that support Hamas see Iran as the funder. It's like Israelis wake up in the morning and all of a sudden see that China, bombed Washington and killed the president. And if you support the PLO, the Palestinian Authority itself, so you understand you have become marginalized. It used to be the number one issue in the Middle East, but all of a sudden there is something way more important. When Iran is bombing Riyadh, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, etc., so the Palestinian question is marginalized.
What is interesting, though, is that in the West, at least, there is an assumption among some activists who have a very shallow understanding of the Middle East that there is a natural alignment between the Palestinian cause and the Islamic regime. And what I thought was interesting is that during the 12-day war, I went to the West Bank. I mean, just to Bethlehem. You know, it's entry level. It was my first time. Didn't want to go to Ramallah. Also, it was during war. And many of the Palestinians there emphasized their distinct needs from Iran, you know, and they said they felt offended when Westerners conflate the Islamic regime with the Palestinian cause, partially because, you know, one side is Sunni, one side is Shiite, so there's distrust there. And so it's kind of funny how you have these pro-Palestinian protesters in the West carrying the Islamic regime's flags even though the Iranian people don't like that, and many Palestinians don't like that.
And when they don't like at all the protesters in Tehran, it tells you something, I guess. However, I wouldn't be too optimistic about the Palestinians because last night, you know, that the ballistic missiles are falling, are making the way, make the way from Tehran all the way west to Tel Aviv. So just before they hit Tel Aviv, it can be seen from the Palestinian cities in Judea and Samaria. So last night I uploaded a video to my Telegram channel showing Palestinians in Nablus, in Shechem, cheering and chanting "Death to Israel, burn Tel Aviv" when they see the ballistic missiles hitting Israel's economic capital city.
So, Amit, we've only got a few more minutes in this interview, and so I'd like you to give a closing statement encapsulating some of the key points that you think are most salient for understanding the current war and life in Israel at this time.
Okay, so from 1982 till today, 2026, almost each and every Israeli who got killed or injured by terrorists was hit basically by Iranian money / weapons / all of the above. Iran was the big funder of terrorism against Israel and military operations against Israel. That's why you see such resilience in Tel Aviv, because people understand that they see a light at the end of the tunnel. They might suffer now. They might suffer even heavily. Tel Aviv has never experienced or has never took such hits since 1947. And yet they know that this is the last crescendo of a 44-year-long war between Iran and Israel, and that a brighter future might arise in a short while. That's why they are taking it so bravely.
Well, thank you for that. That is
Thank
also
you
a
so
sentiment
much.
that I see around me. People acknowledging that there might be great costs to this war, but the rewards could be astronomical, a peaceful or relatively peaceful Middle East. It was great talking today. It was lovely.
Thank you. Thank you so
Please
much.
stay
Thank you
safe.
so much.
And
You too.
I hope to follow you in the future to see more of your updates.
Yes, and let's take a tour of Tel Aviv once the war is over.
Yeah. Oh, and also, happy Purim.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Happy Purim. Bye bye.
Well, I want to thank both of you for that fascinating conversation, Amit and Adam. Obviously sitting here on the other side of the world, it's difficult for us to understand both the complexities of what's taking place above the skies of Iran and really above the skies of Israel as well, and certainly on the ground as well. So thank you very much, Amit and Adam, for sharing with us your time and expertise today. Thank you.